The Todd Shapiro Show.
Time to hit the button!
On Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.
So Vanbex is a big part of our program, and with the support of Kevin and Elisa over there who run things. And once in a while, they're like, hey, why don't you talk to some of our staff and see what they're doing? They're really a lot of them are helping out build out the amazing blockchain programs and just all the stuff that I don't understand anyway. So I'm like, yeah, man, let's get on Timothy Riley Schwarz, who's joining us live from Vanbex in Vancouver. How you doing, Timothy?
I'm doing pretty well, thanks. How are you doing?
Good, man. Am I allowed calling you Riley? Because there's a nickname. Am I allowed calling you Riley, or is that for good friends?
Yeah, it's a middle name, but I've been going by it for quite a while. So whatever you feel like, really.
How did that work out?
I'm not really exactly too sure. Basically, ever since I can remember, I've been called Riley. Maybe just the way I believe my parents said they like the way Timothy Riley sounded rather than Riley Timothy. So. And
Riley, what do you do? What do you do, Timothy Riley? I don't know what to call you. I'll just call you Riley. I'll call you Riley. Sure. I feel like I don't know you well enough to call you Riley, but I'll call you Riley.
We've met before.
Oh yeah, we met before.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, dude. Okay, bro. Dude, now this is easier for me, man. I'm all in now. Don't worry. What's up, Riles? What's up, bro?
Yeah, there you go.
Tell me, what's your role at Vanbex, though?
So I'm part of the development team, more specifically the smart contract side. And so what I do is I design, develop, build all the requirements, and then implement them, and then also, communicate that through the various other developers within the team to kind of echo my thoughts and the blockchain technology throughout our full stack of development.
So when it comes to centralized versus decentralized security tokens, smart contracts, what does that mean for regulation?
It's a bit of a tricky kind of balancing act between, going completely centralized, which is, having, say like the big banks in Canada versus having something completely decentralized, such as, all the ICOs and tokens that you saw, come out in the last year or so. And there's a big divide between the two, and it's tricky because the regulatory bodies, if they want to get on board, they want control. That's the whole point. They want to be able to see what's going on, and they want to be able to make sure that everything's above board and there's, it's auditable, and they can, and if something goes wrong, they can step in and you do whatever they need to enforce them, so to speak. So, these decentralized tokens that came out for the last year or two here, they kind of had a bad rap a little bit, and I think what we needed to be doing is we need to be thinking, well, if we can't exactly get if we can't get centralized tokens to be working, well, then decentralized is never going to happen, and we need to kind of take steps to get to that point. And so it sounds like to me, at least in my opinion, we need to be implementing a bit more of a centralized methodology, and we get a lot of benefits when we start looking at smart contracts and the way that these tokens can get traded and how they're handled and how the compliance can be enforced.
And Riley Schwarz, I know what a smart contract is because I've learned from the greats like, Kevin Hobbs and stuff, but I never know when we might have a new listener or two. In your words, what, for those who don't know what a smart contract is, and not to sound too repetitive on the program, but if you wouldn't mind telling us.
Sure. Yeah. So essentially the way a smart contract works is it operates on the Ethereum blockchain, and basically what happens is it implements a series of rules and permissions and steps that can be taken. And they're completely public, and in a way that if I deploy a smart contract on the Ethereum network, you can be certain as any member of the public can view these things, look at the rules, and know that those will be followed. So essentially it's complete transparency as far as what's considered in a smart contract. So it's like it sounds. It's a contract that is enabled by technology and is enforced by a series of rules of which the public can see, and then therefore they can trust, and then have a look at it and see what's really going on inside of it.
Are we implementing any smart contracts now through Vanbex and some other associates?
Yeah, absolutely. So the premise of our security token platform is the issuance of these security tokens on these smart contracts. And through that, we also have various implementations of regulation and compliance features that we have kind of baked into them that make it so that you have this token and this digital asset operating on a public blockchain that can be accessed anywhere. But you also implement some more of these slightly centralized controls which can either be part of the issuer, part of a third party, like a securities not a securities exchange, a securities entity like the BCSC or the CDS. Like there's quite a few different rules we can implement, and we can get kind of creative with how we do that.
Very cool to hear that, and I always think that, man, everything one day should hopefully be on a smart contract. From no, I'm being very serious. From marriage, to people are like, well, I got a prenup. Well, what about a smart contract? To I'm doing this construction thing. I had a guy stiff me for money, a deposit that he never came and showed up.
Exactly.
Is that sort of your view as well? That hopefully one day because really the smart contract, what it ultimately does, and said it, but I'll do it in layman's terms, and this is why I love the concept so much, and what you're all doing there at Vanbex is you're ensuring that people don't get screwed at the end of it.
Essentially, you're correct, and there's.
I know I'm layman's terms here, Riles. Okay, I'm not so tech so tech whizzy like yourself over there, but that's what's so great about what you're creating. We don't get screwed.
Essentially, absolutely. There's rules, and everyone can see them, and you can verify that these are actionable, and there's limits, and you can quite literally try to break these rules, and you can't break them. That's the nature of the Ethereum blockchain. There's things in place like the consensus mechanisms, the way that these things are determined, and the way that the blocks progress. It's trustless. That's the whole point. It's immutable. The history can't be changed. So you have essentially a massive ledger of transactions of everything that happens on it, and once it's happened, it can't be altered.
Well, what's beautiful about that is it's really accountability at the end of the day, and it'll make people accountable. Tell me about clearing and settlements ecosystem. I actually don't really understand what that means.
Okay, so that was kind of something that came up. I was in Toronto recently with Kevin, and we were speaking to exchanges and brokers and a few different other companies, partners that we were interested in speaking with, and we realized that there's quite a few aspects and steps to this whole process, and that's why it's so complicated. Is to get all of these things working together requires quite a bit of a whole handful of different things that all have to work for it all to do what we want it to do. And one of those in particular, at least on the exchange side of the traditional method of transferring securities or exchanging them, trading them, is the clearing and settlements process. And that's realistically where one of the biggest bottlenecks, if not the biggest bottleneck in the whole process is. So for those who are unfamiliar, essentially clearing and settlements is the process of which an exchange or a broker has decided that a mutually agreeable price between a buyer and a seller for some form of securities. And basically there's a custodian that has to approve and acknowledge and confirm that the person that's selling this asset actually has that asset to sell, and then vice versa. The person paying for it actually has the ability to. And so they basically monitor the ledger for all of these securities getting transacted with, and they basically rubber stamp it. Now, what happens is previously, when everything was done on paper, the banks there had to be some kind of time delay. And that's referred to as T+3 or T+0. And so that's the transaction date is referred to as T, and then +3 refers to the amount of days afterwards when you have to have everything settled. So right now, T+3 means that I make a trade with you, and then in 3 days from now, it is officially written in my name, and then I have access to that. And so T+2 is obviously 2 days and so forth. So what happens is that's when you had to transfer paper and you had to transfer these assets, you had to do it by hand, you had to fill all this paperwork, you had to verify all these things. But now with all the modern technology, we have, why are we waiting 3 days to transfer these things? Why can't we do that instantly? And so that's where the clearing and settlements ecosystem comes in. So it's the idea of basically what we can do is using blockchain technology, specifically Ethereum. They have a public, secure, trustless consensus and an immutable database. And that basically fulfills all the requirements of instant clearing and settlement. But that's hard to communicate and hard to get across because, like you said, the technology is pretty groundbreaking. And you have to get everyone in the same room and have to get them all to understand these things. And that's proving to be it's difficult, especially with things like, you have like Quadriga, you have, bad things have happened in the blockchain space. It's not, it's no surprise. Sorry, not no surprise. It's no secret. Bad things have happened. But moving forward, is the future going to involve blockchain technology? Absolutely. There's no question about that. And we need to just start taking steps. We need to start implementing these things. And someone's got to be the people to do that. Someone's got to put their foot down and say, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to make this happen. And so someone's going to do it. Why can't that be us? Why can't that be someone else? Competition is great. Let's make this happen. Let's innovate. Let's create.
Timothy Riley Schwarz, a software developer, blockchain specifically for Vanbex, working with Kevin Hobbs and the team over there. It really is interesting because, back to the clearing settlements, and one thing I understand about it, now that you say that, there must be a massive backlog too if it's taking that long.
Well, you've got to imagine something goes wrong, and then so now you find that out 3 days later, and you're talking about serious amounts of money. It's not just $10 going from Bob to Tom. It's significant amounts of money, and what seems to be it's hard to get across, but that's Ethereum's the whole blockchain is built on the fact that you can't double spend, you can't move something from point A to point B if you don't have it to start with, and that's literally the entire clearing settlement process is making sure you can't double spend, making sure someone's not basically creating money out of thin air, and make sure everything's accounted for, and then have a history of all the transactions, and that's quite literally the Ethereum blockchain in its most rudimentary form. Do people have a hard time deciphering between the Ethereum blockchain and then Ethereum trading as a cryptocurrency? Yes, and I think that was where a lot of misconceptions about how the whole process works, and there just because anyone can launch a smart contract on the Ethereum network, that doesn't mean and if they have say bugs in their smart contracts and bad things happen and say people lost money, that happened, but that was as a result of carelessness and not making sure their contracts were secure and not going through the proper steps required. They were kind of rushing it, and so that put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, and that gave them a bit of the bad rap. And so, what needs to happen is people need to be stepping forth with quality products and technology, and when it's done right, it works fantastic, and it's absolutely the future. But like you said, the cryptocurrencies of the world, there was things happening that were not Ethereum's fault. It was bad actors, and in any industry where there's lucrative opportunity and there's money to be made, you're going to have bad actors. That's human nature. That's kind of how it works. So in short, yes, I think cryptocurrency kind of gave people a bit of a bad impression of what the Ethereum blockchain could do and what it's possible, what it's capable of. But we need to be focusing on the good aspects of it and what we can prove that works and is going to be future proof, so to speak. But it's really interesting because it's way more than just the currency of what's trading on it. It's an actual platform for basically anything on the blockchain to be used. Absolutely. There's many uses for it, whether that's tracking distributions across countries, like being able to track an item as it progresses, scan it, and it's basically, think of any use you could have for a receipt. The Ethereum blockchain consists of receipts. And that's it. And every day we operate in a system where we have receipts, and we need to be able to track, when did this happen? When was this transaction made? Not necessarily, buying and selling, but whether that was me signing off on something, whether we have a contract and we have a bunch of money locked up in it, and we need 6 parties to sign off on it. And as soon as that happens, the money gets transferred automatically, and that the money sits there, and that's one of the amazing aspects of it that it's hard to comprehend and put in words. I study this stuff. I work on it every day, so I'm used to it, but to the layman's, it is very overwhelming at first. And very exciting. Riley Schwarz, who's with us. I know you're a massive basketball fan. We saw a basketball game together. Playoffs going on right now. Raptors just won a big series, and I think everyone predicted that they would crush the Magic, and they did. Will we see sort of a sports betting on an Ethereum blockchain? Oh, there's a massive opportunity for sports betting on the blockchain. There is a handful of all kinds of gambling applications to sports betting. Augur comes to mind. There's plenty of ways, like the smart contracts could absolutely facilitate betting. You make a smart contract that says, me and Todd are both going to throw in an Ethereum, and then you can query an oracle that finds out who won the game, and then automatically disperses that money to the winner. it's a great way to the transparency of versus having a platform where you've got to pay fees, you've got to have your money locked up on like a betting site.
Some weird guy show up at your house with a bag full of cash or a gun.
You never know, right? But yes.
Very interesting stuff. So, what you're following now? We're 8 left. Are you following it all?
Yeah, I'm not just interested in blockchains. I follow basketball pretty. It's one of my not a guilty pleasure. It's definitely a pleasure. And it kind of it's what I do when I get home, basically. But yeah, no, I've been following it quite closely. There's been some. I was expecting this playoffs. I had a feeling it was going to be better than last year. And I thought, maybe Golden State will just kind of face roll the whole NBA again, but. There's been some very exciting.
The Clippers are doing like Lou Williams, former Raptor, having a kick-ass night last night.
Yeah, like that. Absolutely. If you had told me of all the first rounds, which one was going to go to Game 6?
Oh, that's right, because that one's still. Is that the only one still going on?
So there's that, and then Denver and San Antonio play tonight as well.
That is very interesting. Normally, it's sort of the West that just wipes through everyone, but yeah, no one thought that the Clippers would lose to that the Warriors would lose to, and I forgot about that. I just assumed that one was done.
Yeah. No, and they won them in Golden State, both of the games.
Wow! So Game 6 could be at home for the Clips. Do they have a chance?
Yeah, that's a big. I think it's a tough to say. I think given obviously the horrible news about Cousins and unfortunately for the Clippers, they could quite literally put Steve Kerr at the 5 and they could probably still win the title. They just have an arsenal of absolute monsters back there. So. I think that realistically they're going to be fine. I think Golden State will likely still win, but Cleveland beat them. They were down 3-1 and Cleveland got them. So anything can happen.
Raptors play the 76ers, and really the deepest the Raptors I think ever went, wasn't it? They a couple times now, but there was that big heartbreaking loss years and years ago against the 76ers when Vince Carter missed that last shot. What do you think about that? Can the Raps take down the 76ers?
I think there's a lot of play here. I think firstly, I'm pretty. The Raptors are more consistent. There's no doubt about it. Philly's got a lot more of a streakiness to them. Once again, like if you had told me that Brooklyn would give them a run for their money at the first round, I would have laughed. But look what happened. And you got to think, Philly's really heavily reliant on Embiid. They built their whole system around him, and if he goes down in the first couple games, Raptors absolutely have a massive edge. Ben Simmons, ever since Jared Dudley kind of, maybe poked the bear a little bit, he stepped up his game. But in the first couple games there, Philly looked terrible against Brooklyn.
And the Bucks and the Bucks and Celtics. What do you think?
I think Giannis is on a mission, and I think that he's absolutely going to. He's not going to leave anything left behind. And I'm not too impressed by the Celtics these days. I think Giannis is just too good. He's my MVP of the season for sure.
Unbelievable. Riley, I wanted to ask, and I'm serious when I ask this question, and which is why I wanted to talk basketball with you. Do guys who, they're software developers and programmers and understand blockchain space and really technology-based, the way, things work on, percentages and mathematical scales and all this kind of stuff, do you view sports a little differently? Like, is that how you look at the players out there always sort of weighing, beyond emotional aspects? Do you look at things way more factually?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. I think that the start of that was, at least for me, and I think a lot of people pick up on this, is clearly Moneyball. The athletics. They basically figured out, they juked the system. They figured out that math was the way to really get the edge. Now you see teams spending an absolute fortune on analytics of the players and the stats and everything imaginable. They're tracking the stats. If you go to the NBA website and you look at the stats, it is unbelievable the stats they keep on players now. And then the analytics department is obviously, they spend fortune. Every team spends a fortune on analytics. So, what's the best? What's the EV? How can I possibly get every edge possible to make the best opportunity for our teams? And clearly, quite a few of my my highly math competent, very technical friends.
You're a nerd. It's okay. You can say it, Riley. It's fine
absolutely.
to say that. Yeah.
Yes, I'm a nerd, and my nerd friends. The math behind it's wild. Like as I was I was reading something the other day that you look at Westbrook, for example. He's had the worst shooting record, taking volume and efficiency combined, since 1978, and people think of him as one of the best players in the NBA. Now, what does that say about the sport? Does that mean that do you need a good shooting record to be considered one of the best players? Or do you
just need to shoot a heck of a lot?
Exactly. The game has changed. Look at the amount of how many triple doubles happen in a league now. That used to be a once in a blue moon kind of opportunity, and then Westbrook's averaging them for an entire season. The game is changing, and there's no doubt about it. And that has to do, perhaps, in my opinion, a lot to do with the analytics behind it. They're crunching the numbers, and the numbers say shoot a bunch of threes. That's the plan. Jump shots, 3 points versus pushing the paint and going to the rim is changed drastically, and I think it'll continue to change.
And I don't really know this. I love basketball, but I don't know this, which is why I ask. I know in hockey they have all these advanced statistics now, like Corsi and all this kind of stuff. Do they actually have a lot of advanced statistics that they do in basketball now?
Absolutely, yeah. They've got, like I said, on the NBA website, they've got a massive database of all these things, and they track everything from the other players' percentages based on who's coming off the bench, who's coming on the bench, exactly where to shoot. They'll have someone, 2 minutes left in the game. There's someone who's talking to the coach's ear and has said, okay, this person, given how the game has been played, our history versus playing this team, exactly where we want the ball to be and who's going to shoot it. And you got to think that's going to take a massive amount of data points from a massive data set. And they've got to crunch that stuff live because the game changes. You have to adapt to say one of your star players is going off. If he misses, say 5 3-pointers in a row, do you put him in? Do you play the odds? Do you play he's gonna make one eventually? Do we keep feeding him? And so it's a ridiculous amount of numbers. Yeah.
I love to hear this stuff. I really do, because I think people sometimes don't think. But at the end of it all, do you when it comes to sports, because I know that when it comes to technology, you need programmers and you need companies like Vanbex. You need people with heart and determination. That's what's to drive the programming. But there is this. Do you still think, as technical based as you are, that there is still a stat you can't measure, which is heart, which is.
I think we're talking about the same thing, but I've always referred to it as grit.
Yes.
I can't remember exactly who coined that, and I remember reading about it, but it's grit, and absolutely there's like a gut feeling, and there's some things you obviously can't measure with numbers. It's so for example, I play a lot of soccer, I recently did pretty well. I went to provincials, and we actually ended up in a penalty shootout in one of our first rounds, and. One of the things that happens in a penalty shootout is of the 11 players on your team, they have the first 5 people to shoot have to be on the field when the last whistle blows. So your substitutes can't come on to shoot. So what happens is, and no one else can come on the field. So they gather in the middle, and the first thing the captain says, who wants to shoot? And of the 11 people, someone pipes up and someone says, I want to go first. And that's something you can't measure. That's something that happens instantaneously. That person who steps up and says, has the confidence, has the ability to step up and is ready and has that, that's the person that's going to score. And so, that's a perfect example of grit. And that's not something, maybe they're having a bit of an off day. How can you measure that? And then maybe someone's feeling really, really good and they're on it and they want it. You got to give it to them, you got to give them the benefit of the doubt sometimes.
Oh, man, I love this. Listen, I thought this was a great chat, and I, as much as I love Kevin and everyone over at Vanbex, I please join us again. It's a really, really fun chat with you. Timothy Riley Schwarz from Vanbex, vanbex.com, Blockchain Solutions. You guys are phenomenal over there, and we appreciate you helping clarify some things, talking about smart contracts, clearing and settlement ecosystems, basketball, and grit, man. Thank you for bringing it today.
No problem. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Cheers, Riley.
Have a great day.
Rouse, man. What a beauty.
This is the Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.